So, friends, welcome. We think we are live with Trans Northland. Hey, my name is Sean Hayes, and I'm the executive director here at Trans Northland. I use he, him, and his pronouns, and I'm super pumped to be joined by our second guest star, who I will let introduce themselves.
Hi, my name's, I guess I should say Dr. Nomi Ostrander. I never really used the doctor part, but Nomi Ostrander, I am both a faculty member at UMD in social work. I'm the department head, as well as a sex therapist and a therapist who does a lot of work with queer and trans folks, both sort of in the Northlands and further abroad.
Yes, we are so excited to have you with us, Nomi. Um, and so, as folks who may have caught our first conversation 2 weeks ago, this is sort of a new thing we're trying out here at Trans Northland to have these live, what I hope to be very organic conversations, welcoming in wonderful folks such as Nomi here and Heather, our board chair from our first conversation. And I've already got some folks lined up for upcoming conversations as well. So it's just a way for us to try to connect more with community in a virtual way where you don't have to leave your house. You can meet some new, really cool folks who are here in the Northland and around who are, we're all here together in a time of a lot of chaos and fear and I think worry. And so just another way for us to try to connect with all of you, our community, and wanting you to connect with us too. And so going right into, I think, what's going to be sort of our first segment, I guess, of these conversations. And I got to give a shout out to our friends Anna, Raven, and Cam, who do the Transgender podcast. This is sort of an idea that I am borrowing from them about sharing some gender euphoria moments. Because oftentimes, right, us as trans folks, we're constantly dealing with that gender dysphoria in some way or another at different levels. And so I just loved their idea of being able to pull out those moments that we do all experience where we have that just great feeling in our bodies and hearts and brains that just like aligns with who we are, right? And so these can be, life-changing moments. They can also be small things, right? Everyday things that just feel really good for us in a time when so much is overwhelming and really negative towards us and our community. And so, Nomi, I'm going to put you on the spot. Have you thought of anything? Because I can
I,
share mine.
yeah, go ahead. You share yours first. That'd be great.
Okay. And this is okay, so this is on the spectrum of smaller things, but for me, it's been interesting. So I've been on testosterone now for just over 10 years, which, that alone is all the gender euphoria. I never thought I would be at this point. And I remember, that first tee shot being like, I want to be 10 years in, I want to have the beard, I want to have the low voice. And now it's like I've been able to come into those things, which is so good feeling. Man, I needed to reflect on that right here in this moment, I guess. And so then my actual moment that I had thought of is not really a moment, it's more of a like body thing, but I have really been enjoying lately seeing veins on my hands and like forearms. I don't know why that is just like I love it. I'm like, look at those hands. Those look good. Those are good hands, good veins. So that's what I have. That's sort of a smaller thing in the scheme of
I mean, it's those
life,
smaller
but
things that are so important, right? Like it's not every day that you can have like a big like Shazam space where, you have a major gender euphoria moment. I think sometimes and most times it's probably is like those little moments, right? Like a good shade of lipstick, like that always feels great. And it's yeah, it's perhaps nothing that's life altering for everybody else, but it just feels great.
that is it. And I feel like, yeah, a great lipstick or I think of another small one I'll share is my kiddo who is almost 7. is super into painting toenails. And I remember the first time she did that, maybe a year or two ago. And it was really challenging for me to like go out and wear flip-flops and have painted toenails, which now seems so silly because I literally am like, "Will you paint my toenails?" And I get so many compliments, and I get to say, "My kid did this. Isn't this great?"
Awesome.
And so yeah, just like growing into these things that, where it's like, oh, I can actually let go of all this gross heteronormative, patriarchal, gross
Hmm.
masculinity stuff and just enjoy this thing that brings my kid so much joy. And I love it too. I love the color. I love what she designs.
Yeah, that's so amazing because I love everything about that. Um, and has me thinking about this quote that I found from Janet Mock in Redefining Realness. I sort of have like a notes app that just like I find a quote and I just stuff it in there. Um, and she's saying essentially like, I wish that instead of investing in these hierarchies of what's right and who's wrong, who's authentic and who's not, and who's ranking people according to rigid standards that ignore the diversity of our genders and sexualities, we gave people the freedom and resources to define, determine, and declare who they are. Right. And so like, you know, painted toenails being a thing now that's making you feel good, like that's awesome. There's no need to, to rush from, I think, one like box to another box. That doesn't necessarily there that may not necessarily capture your entirety. Because obviously like you're a whole universe. Um,
Mm,
so
I love that. Oh, I love that, Novi. We all are whole universes. Ah, that's beautiful. I have a tattoo that is like a universal spacey kind of theme, and oh, I love
nice.
that. So, oh, gems, the gems that are going to come from these conversations. It makes me so excited.
Sure.
Um, and so, as we move into our conversation, this is something that maybe some of our audience can give some feedback on. I'm trying to figure out kind of like the flow of these conversations. And one of the things we definitely want to be highlighting is all of the amazing queer, trans-centered events that are happening in and around our community, just because, we at Trans Northland know and like really deeply believe that connecting into community is like probably the most important thing we could be doing at a time like this, to sort of fight off like the isolation, and loneliness, I think, that can happen when we're not connected into a community. And so maybe I will just, my debate is like, do I talk about some of these events now, while folks are maybe watching in the beginning of the show, and then, do some reminders after our chat, or do I wait until the end and you have to build anticipation and watch through our entire conversation? I don't know. We'll see. But I think today I'm just going to start off by mentioning a couple. And just to start, if you don't know, for folks watching, whether you're live right now, hey, or you're watching after the fact on YouTube, one of the things we've worked hard on curating over the last year is an events calendar that's on our website. And it has, everything Trans Northland is doing, all of our support groups and the events that we plan. And it has so many other events that so many folks in our community are planning. And it's everything from, there's so many different drag groups and events happening. There are so many more like art related, music, shows popping up right now. And so definitely check out our events calendar on our website. And if I can think of the website, I think I can. It's transnorthland.org/connection. And that'll bring you right to our calendar. And a couple just to mention, for Trans Northland, we've got our tea room that happens every Tuesday and Thursday morning down at the Imaginarium in downtown Duluth. And that's from 9 a.m. till noon every Tuesday and Thursday. And we've got coffee, tea, coloring pages. There's sometimes dogs. It's a lot of fun. So come down. You can find all the details on the calendar. Just another quick mention, tonight, there's a couple events happening tonight on a Wednesday. What? This is amazing. There is a open stage drag show that's being called Unhinged at the TBD Ballroom. So I think, as they say, ask a punk and they'll tell you where that's located in town. I actually got to go check out that space yesterday morning, and it is so cool. And I felt so old because I'm like, this is this is where all the kids are hanging out, the young people, I should say. And it's such a cool space. So check that out happening tonight. There's also a queer skate club meeting up tonight. So if you're into skating, I'm pretty sure that's every kind of wheel type thing, skateboards, roller skates, all of the above. Show up, meet some folks, have fun. And then I'm really excited. This coming Saturday, we're going to get to go down and table at an event that Transforming Families is
Mm.
putting on, and they do every year, this time of year, which is called the Day of the Transgender Child. And I've known about that event for a couple of years, and it's just never really worked out for us to be down there and be involved. And so, if you are taking a cities trip, if you know, are down in that area, that event is happening in Loring Park, and I'm just so excited to be able to show up to something like specifically to support our kids and families. And that is going to be great. And then lastly, I'll just throw out we have our next queer botany hike planned. So
Yes.
you can find all the details on our events calendar. And yeah, I think there's just so many different ways to connect with folks. I mean, I went to this botany hike and I was definitely the person who knew the least, and I had a blast. And there were like 12 people there, and I think I knew one other person. So there's so many queer and trans folks who are like coming and landing in Duluth, and we just want everyone to connect. So check that out. And yeah, so let's get into it, Nomi. I know you and I have been messaging a little bit, trying to kind of think about what do we talk about? There's so much, right, that we could talk about. And I know that you had said you'd made a couple notes, and I think when I immediately thought of inviting you in, I just gotta say, like, there's just so much about who you are as a human, the compassion that you have, and like your focus on healing and connection and community. Like, I feel like that's what we need to hear more about in general. And so I just want to say thanks again for making the time. And I'd be
Absolutely.
curious if anything is kind of coming to the forefront in this moment, and we can see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's coming to mind because I think one of the questions that you had asked is sort of like, thinking about life story, right? And with that, I can't help but think about community, and just how important community is. And I think especially right now, which feels so isolating and not good at all. Like it's really the community spaces that I think is just where I'm finding the most support. And I think it's where I found the most support, you know, throughout my life is, being in community. And sometimes it was even just being sort of like alone amongst others who are in community felt good. Um, I can think of times where I might have had a really hard day when I was in Chicago, for example, and just needed to be among other like queer and trans folks, and could go to a queer or trans neighborhood or event, and my engagement may have been more or less active, depending on just sort of mood and who was there, but just seeing other people living in their joy is just so very powerful, and I think especially right now, again, when things are seemingly dicier. I think that's so important. And I'm thinking about you, Sean, right? So, um, I moved up to Duluth in 2022, and I think the like my first few experiences with Duluth was one moving basically right next door to Third Street Bakery, which is very visibly trans affirming and trans allied. Um, I know that there was an article in the paper, I think, about deep cuts and and then I think it was the inaugural Trans Joy Fest that happened, which I know now from some behind the scenes that that really was put together very quickly, and just what it's like blossomed into has been just so wild. And so I've been, I had moments where I'm like, and I know this isn't true, but I had moments where I like, have I moved from Chicago to like some like trans like community that is just so hidden? But I know that that came with a lot of work, and I'm just curious from for you, Sean. You know, I think you've built so much, and obviously you've built so much with other people involved. I was on the board for a while, and I think of other board members who put in a ton of work. But I'm just curious, like, so you've been building for 10 years or more, perhaps, um, and thinking about people who may be in those areas that don't have as much stuff. I'm just wondering, like, what I'm curious what your lessons are in terms of, as you were building, like, how do you do that work in smaller communities? Like, how did you do it?
That's a great question. Um, Man, oh, I like this. Okay. How did I do it? Well, I would say I didn't. I mean, I think I just oftentimes, I get asked questions like this, and I think like you said, there have just been so many folks, from our community, many of whom are still here, who have maybe moved on from their roles in their work with Trans Northland and are working with DS Pride or are creating other groups that are just, I just think it's amazing. We need all of the opportunities and spaces, right? Because one thing that Trans Northland builds isn't going to fit the needs of everybody in our community, right? It may be like a jumping off point, and then they can connect with all of these other folks, right? Who now, are creating and organizing so many amazing events and things and groups. And I think back, I think this is something that oftentimes will sort of reignite my hope is thinking back to 10-ish years ago when I was just, as an individual, as a human, I was struggling. I didn't know, what it meant to be trans. I just knew that I was, and I knew I needed to connect with community. Kind of like how do I do this kind of a vibe, an energy. And so, for me, that has saved me, like being able to connect with a handful of folks 10 years ago in the building for women and say, we gotta keep this group going. We gotta keep offering this support group. And then as that grew, right, we started getting asked to do more because community wanted and needed more. They wanted to hang out. They wanted to have fires on the beach. You know, um, we started hosting the, annual events that we do for Trans Day of Visibility and Trans Day of Remembrance. And so I feel like it is, yes, I've always been involved, and I'm so grateful for that. It makes me feel a little choked up, honestly. And I'm so grateful that I get to do this work now full time and as hard as it is, it's my dream, right? And I know it's so many folks' dreams to like do this kind of community work, and to be compensated for it and to be able to have stable lives, right? Where we can survive and also consider what thriving looks like, right? And so I think, the answer, there's so many answers to your question, but it's the people who, from the get-go, who I think, we were able to come together, we were able to, dream of what we wanted to see and had some energy and time. I was in my 20s.
Sure.
I had way more energy then too, but So I think and I think that as far as what I've learned about our community's history, like that is how it happens, whether you're in tiny little Duluth
Hmm.
or even tinier Twig or
Yeah.
Superior, or Chicago, right? Like people, we somehow and thankfully we find each other,
Yep.
um, and then get to share these experiences, the hard ones, and support one another, and also the joy, right? And like creating more joy together.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And like I think that's that's one of the things that's so nice too is that what has been built and what others have built as well. Um, I think like Trans Northland is sort of like this really interesting hub, but it is not like the orthodoxy or like the only um sort of game in town, but it's a good like, hey, let me just be a connector here, and like here's some events, come and meet other people. But like, there's some great drag troops in Duluth, and I think the work like out front has done, and and thinking about hubs, right, with the city council passing the um, uh, my brain is a blank, but passing the new ordinance or the new uh,
Pride resolution.
yeah, pride resolution. Thank you. Eventually, my brain will get there. Um, and part of that pride resolution, I was there for the debate and to watch it pass. Is creating a hub in in Duluth. Thinking about people who are moving here from other states and other towns that um, folks aren't feeling at home in anymore. And so like it's such a just a wonderful space that I think Trans Northland can facilitate. And again, um, even just connecting folks at any of the events is just fantastic. And again, there's just so many like I am always amazed at how many drag shows there is in a given week in Duluth. Um, and it's just fantastic and it's wonderful and it's just amazing.
Right. I am always also amazed by the amount of drag, and I love it so much. And I think, there's so much room for all of us, right? To show up and to be like, to just bring all of our queer weirdo energy, like whatever it looks like for each of us. Yeah, there's just so much space out there, and I think the diversity too of like all these different events is so cool as well. Like botany hikes, drag shows, queer art clubs and skate
Yeah.
clubs. Like there's the new what is it, the Duluth Queer Rec group, and
Yeah.
there's a Stonewall Sports,
Mhm.
chapter that's opening up. And so it's like, man, yeah, we are trans folks, we are queer folks, and we also have hobbies and different things about us, right? That
Totally.
are things we want to spend our time doing. And I just think it's so beautiful that like there's so many ways now to connect.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think, you mentioned too, this idea of we're having so many people coming to, Minnesota as a whole and to Duluth. And that is something I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on too, because I've been thinking a lot about that. In terms of, the work that the legislature did in 2023 to sort of label Minnesota as a trans refuge state. So that's what, 2 years ago that happened. And we certainly have seen a huge influx of communications from people from places like Texas and Missouri and Tennessee and literally all over, in places where these bans are being passed,
Yeah.
and people are legitimately scared and wanting to flee those places. And so it makes me wonder. I mean, I've heard that from a lot of folks that Duluth sort of feels like this hub, right? And I think that's part of what we want to build with Trans Northland. We want to be a landing space, maybe, for those folks who are new, who are coming here. Some of them have plans and they have jobs lined up and housing, and a lot of them are just coming here,
Mhm.
with no plan. They are homeless, they're getting on housing wait lists, they're looking for jobs. And so I'm curious what if you've experienced, hearing those stories of like trans migrants coming this way. I mean, you yourself, like, I don't know
Yeah.
exactly why you came, but you also like are a
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
transplant, and
Yeah.
then like how do we as a community become like more and more of a welcoming, like hospitable place for all these
Mhm.
like new queer trans folks and
Yeah.
families.
No, I mean that's such a good question. And I think like one of the benefits that I think Duluth has is that it is fairly small. Um, and it may seem counterintuitive that I think its smallness makes finding community easier. Because I do hear the stories of people who like land in the cities and it's just like I don't know where to find community. And I probably like all of us, I have a lot of friends in the cities and a lot of acquaintances and a lot of trans folks that I just adore in the cities, and trying to help people who are transplants find that community. But then so as you know, one of the things that I do is that I do a lot of research with trans community folks. And this current project, one of the current projects that I'm doing with a colleague is interviewing gender affirming care providers here in Minnesota, and sort of talking about sort of like what is their experience, what do they see more from their patients or clients, whatever language they want to use. Um, and one thing that I think is interested in and seems to be a shared experience is that not only is there gratitude of being in a trans refuge state, but it's also sort of like, all right, well, also, where's the next place? Which I think is such a powerful moment and a powerful thing to think about as well. Um, uh, and that may be beyond this part, but I guess for now, like right, thinking about how to make um, Duluth and Minnesota even more welcoming, and you certainly see that also from um, healthcare providers who now have more trans folks to see, and some of that is because the influx, and some of that is because other providers may have made different decisions about who they're working with. And, I sort of always feel like if, alleged or supposed allies are that quick to drop folks, then, good riddance. Uh, but yeah, probably rambled through that question a little bit, but like, um, yeah, like I really think that, it'd be interesting. I'd be curious because, you've got some folks on the Trans Northland board. There have been folks who have, um, been interviewed for news stories, but I'd be curious if there was a transplant focus group in terms of like what lessons do they have, or like how do they look at that, and yeah, what do they wish that they had when they arrived or shortly thereafter.
Okay, so is this a new project we're gonna start working on?
I mean, I'm always happy to partner with you on whatever. So yeah, we could absolutely do that.
Oh
Um,
my goodness. That is brilliant, honestly. And it makes me think of a recent podcast episode I listened to from do you follow Translash Media at all?
yeah, yeah,
With Amara
yep,
Jones. Oh my gosh, I've followed them for years, and actually I think she was featured in some article, and it's like, I don't know if it was the tagline or what, but it was like Amara Jones has literally called all of this, like from
sure.
the years of reporting that she's been doing. But
Mhm.
it's so interesting because they had these parents on. She was interviewing these parents who had made the decision to move abroad with their trans
Sure.
child, and sharing the story of kind of how that worked, and what were the hard parts, what was challenging, what would you do differently. And so this is very interesting because I think, as you said, there is some research now happening, and I know that's definitely your jam. And it made me think of there was recently and I won't remember the exact name of it, but there was like a transgender homelessness study
Mm,
that I believe the Wilder group was involved with in the Twin Cities area. And we were a part of that. I know they interviewed lots of different organizations in the state and just, released a report about the status of transgender homeless folks. And
mhm,
it's a crisis, right? We know that homelessness in general is, just beyond where it should be, right? And folks are struggling. Not to mention the administration that's currently like attacking homeless folks,
sure,
right? And houseless people. And so we have that report that very clearly says, here's what we need. We need a trans-specific shelter. We need, listing out some of those needs. And then it also makes me think of the recent need survey that happened over the summer with, I think it was the LGBTQIA2S plus need survey that the commission down in the cities, was doing. And so I think that that is going to also provide a lot of information about what our community as a whole is needing right now, here in Minnesota. Um, but yeah, I mean, we gotta start building some stuff and like getting ready to welcome these folks, right? Because I'm like one guy who answers some emails, like here's a couple ways, here's a couple housing places, I can share resources,
sure.
but bigger picture, what was that? Was it a article that had just said that like Minnesota is like the top state for having transgender residents now? And literally we're seeing the numbers
Mhm,
expand and increase, and our community is growing. And yet, yeah, where's the funding,
mhm,
Minnesota legislature, to build a hub where
mhm,
people could come, right? Transitional
right,
housing for trans folks and families. And
yep,
and we are having many conversations as a board with Trans Northland. And I know there's so many people in the community who are also, thinking about housing in particular. How do we house our folks?
mhm,
Um, because it's like if you're unemployed but you're also unhoused, like it's really difficult to go out and get a job. It's not
yeah,
just like go apply at Subway and bam, they're calling you and you're starting and you have work clothes. And like there's a whole process that needs to happen for a lot of folks to get them stabilized, right? And then really like integrate into our Northland community here. And yeah, so I don't know. There's so much there. I mean, I don't know your thoughts there, Nomi, but um, with the research and so much of the data showing that this is a need,
yeah,
it's like, what are the next steps now that we're getting the numbers that are
mhm,
proving what we've been saying, right?
sure.
Now, how do we get the resources to then provide better services?
Yeah, and I mean that is like the magic question, right? I think some things, because I always like to still stay focused on things that can be done in the short term. Right? Like, I think you and I and maybe the board has taken this over now, but maybe worked on the last um, resource guide for Duluth and the really the Twin Ports. Um, and I think part of it is keeping that up to date, making sure that people know where there's options, right? Like I know that certainly for Trans Joy Fest, um, that Trans Northland has, clothing donations, but it might even be thinking about clothing donations for work interviews or something, right? Like uh, UMD, where I teach, right? We've got a space where people can access clothing. I think it's probably limited to students, but clothing for interviews because not everybody has whatever professional attire is. Um, and yeah, so I think it's things like that. I think so as one of my other roles in this community is as the um, chair of the Human Rights Commission for the city. And I want to make sure that folks know that if you are feeling that there is discrimination, like please do reach out to us because we do have the uh, the duty to investigate, reasonable, um, uh, this is where I need Dr. Marcia Liu to like make sure my language is correct on this, but to investigate allegations of discrimination. Um, and I'm happy to provide a link. I don't have it offhand, but the link to the city's page for filing any human rights violations. So, if you are in a shelter temporarily and feeling discriminated against or have experienced something that's um, awful, please let us know, and we'll do our part to try and uh, investigate that and change that. Um, but then funding, yeah, funding's always going to be a just such a big challenge, and I wish that we could even move to more of a housing first model before having to qualify for all these other pieces before you get housing. But um, yeah, I think that's still going to be the magic piece. And this is also a space where like mutual aid can be a bigger role, and where if you look just sort of across the country in trans organizations, there is a lot of mutual aid. I'm blanking on one organization that right now is doing a funding drive because um, they provided micro grants to help people relocate. I have to look at my social media for it, but um, so it's things like that. And I think sometimes, as Sean, the barrier to getting relocated sometimes might just be like tanks of gas to get out of town. Uh, and that's something that can be provided well through mutual aid.
Yes, I think the mutual aid component is definitely growing need, I think. Um, And, it was interesting. I was at the Imaginarium, must have been yesterday, and there were a couple folks there, right? And somehow we were talking about, this housing thing and money, right? Where do we find money? How do we do this, real estate kind, stuff that sort of feels totally out of my league, right? I'm just like a guy who's been planning some community events for a couple of years, and like it's above my pay grade, right? It's like we're getting to these issues that are, um, I don't know, so severe, that it's like we have to sort of be growing and shifting in to fit those needs, I think, in our community. And we're learning as we go how to do that. But mutual aid, I mean, literally, after we hang up on this call, like I'm going to be sending mutual aid to another person who has reached out. And we just, sent some mutual aid to a person who's, making her way, trans woman from South Carolina, I believe, that had worked with one of our board members. And we have this fund that we are continuing to add funds to for specifically like emergency mutual aid type situations. And so, I think, man, if you're an ally watching this, like that's something that you could do if you have the ability to become a recurring donor and give $20 a month that is specifically for mutual aid, then it's like that money is going into the hands of a trans person, a non-binary, gender expansive person who really needs it, whether they're fleeing a state or leaving a domestic violence type relationship, folks who really need those funds, to get gas, as you said, or to buy food, or, these basic necessities that, you know, theoretically folks should be able to get some of these services, right, through the government, through other churches and other like philanthropic groups, right? But oftentimes, as we know in the LGBT plus community, it's oftentimes us taking care of us. And so, for those of us who have the ability to skip a coffee or whatever it is, I mean, I order one less DoorDash a month and I can give $30,
Mhm.
in place of that to mutual aid, and so and it's interesting, as we're talking about how do we build and expand, we need so much money to do this. It's like, there are people in the community who have, I think, the means and maybe the heart and compassion to be interested in having a conversation about how could we become supporters? How could we, assist? And if enough of us, right, get together, we can create this thing and we can just, run with it. Um, but gosh, money is like always the big brick wall we keep
Sure.
running into.
Well, and to that point, like I would also note, right, like anything helps, like, not trying to do a telethon, but really any amount I think is beneficial because again, you don't necessarily know sort of what circumstances are. And I know if it takes two people to buy a tank of gas, like it could be a lifeline for folks. Um, so yeah.
Certainly, yep. Um, so many folks, I think, are just struggling with those basic needs, right? Like what is it? You would know this Maslow's
Yeah,
hierarchy
yep.
or so,
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's hard to
like
self-actualize if you're worried about your sort of basic needs.
right, right. And I think, this is maybe a shift in our conversation. I'd be curious, and maybe we wrap up after this, but just in the last couple of days, I'll be very honest, I don't spend much time watching the news because it would just totally overwhelm me in addition to the work that I do every day. But I get, little bits and chunks on TikTok and, whatever. And so there's some very real scary rhetoric out there right now, right? About,
Hmm.
accusing trans people of being violent, of being mentally ill, of being terrorists, which if you would have asked me a year or 10 years ago, do you ever think someone might label you as a terrorist because of being transgender? I would have been like, what? But maybe I should have seen that coming. But and so I think about the people who have reached out to us in the last couple of days, people who live in Minnesota, people who live right next door, right in Superior, in Wisconsin, a very different state with
Sure.
different laws and whatnots. Um, and people are just really worried about safety,
Mhm.
like what do we do? Who's got the game plan, right? And it's a very weird question to be asked and to try to sort of think through, like what can we share with folks? In terms of helping them kind of decide what feels best for them. Um, and, a couple of the things that I've been trying to, make sure I say to folks is like, I mean, number one, and maybe it just feels like empty words to folks who are struggling, but like you are not alone. Like just sort of reminders of the fact that like we are all very much aware of how hard things are right now and how much fear there is. I'm scared of what's happening and what's coming too. And, you know, at the same time, yeah, it's like, how do you keep living your everyday life and plan for like, do I need to move to Canada? Do I need to take my family out of here? Do we need, what are we, how do I make sure my kid keeps getting their gender affirming care, right? And so just I don't know. I've heard from different, mentors that I follow that, have talked about, preparing for this sort of time of instability or instability. Um, Very similar to how you would prepare for a natural disaster.
Sure.
For example, it's like having sort of a go bag that has your important documents and clothes and what you might need if you had to leave, if there was an earthquake, or, I guess for us, like planning for a blizzard, right? What are the sort of essentials that you need to make sure you can have ready to go if you need? But also, like I've been telling folks in Wisconsin and Superior, if you can move to Duluth, try
Hmm.
to do that. Like there's so many options, right? That folks can consider. Um, and so I don't know. What would you say in terms of someone comes to you today and is like, I don't know how to prepare for the future. I'm scared of what's coming. I'm scared of losing my rights, or, what might you say to folks who
Yeah.
are coming with those very real fears?
Sure. I mean, I think you said it really well there at the end, right? Like I think the acknowledgement that these are reasonable concerns to have, reasonable anxieties to have right now, because it is such a trying time, and such a you know unknown future piece. And I think part of it would be thinking about, um, you know, what uh, you know, what are the things that might feel, you know, more prepared for you, right? If it is putting together a go bag, for example, like if that's a piece, then then maybe that's something you do. If that then allows you to, um, let that not be so present in your mind, after that, right? So like I think so much of this, like so much of the anxiety and so much of the like thinking things through over and over again, this rumination, and perseveration, right, can feel like you are actually like resolving something, you're planning something. But in fact, I think it's just rumination and perseverating. Like it's just letting the anxiety really go. And so again, I think to your best ability of, you know what, I'm gonna make a plan for what I need, um, if I need to do something, and I'm gonna go with that. And similarly, I think great idea to not watch a whole lot of news right now, uh, and in part just because it's so ridiculous and it's so wild. But it's just not gonna feed your spirit, and feed sort of who you are. So, again, this is where I say like invest in community. Go out to a drag show, go out to one of Trans Northland's events. Right, we are just a few weeks away from National Coming Out Day, so I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of events on October 11th, happening. Like hang out with friends and do stuff. And I think do stuff, away from television, away from social media. Um, uh, but if you feel like you need to do something to take care of yourself, go ahead and do it, and then try to let it go, knowing and just being comfortable in the fact that you've created that go bag, or you have, um, you know, uh, you've done things that help you feel more safe. Um, yeah, I think that's sort of where I would start. And obviously, this could be a long conversation. Will be specific to everybody, um, right? Like there are things that I've done, like, and I've done this a while ago, on Google Maps. I've blurred out my where I live, so you can like blur out where you live, which you know may not be the most direct thing, but it's helpful. And maybe there's just other pieces for you that would be useful. Um, and actually, that would be I'll put a plug in for one of your future live streams of having somebody who like this is their focus in terms of like I don't know with some practical things you can do, that will help you feel like you've done the stuff, of planning, that might be good. Um, like I'm happy to talk about sort of the mental emotional piece, but maybe it'd be helpful to have somebody who really knows, that side of things.
Love that idea a lot. Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm such a person who loves connecting with people, and I was just thinking as you said that, right? Like bringing in some, experts who have thought about these really tangible
Yeah.
plans you can make, and it makes me think of our friends over at Magia Chai Land Sanctuary.
Mhm.
They're based kind of up and around Two Harbors area, and I think they just put it on, or it's coming up. It's like a food sustainable workshop where
Mhm.
it's like learn how to, grow your own food. I think I might be totally getting that wrong. There's some workshop though that they are offering where it is like a very practical thing. Like, how can we learn kind of in community how to do this thing? And yeah, there's so many like experts that we have in this community who could come on and probably talk just about that. So I've made a note.
Oh yeah.
all of you viewers. We will look into this. And if you are that person and you're watching this by chance, reach out to me, Sean, Sean, at transnorthland.org. Love to invite you to come on and have that conversation. Um, because yeah, I mean, something that I, personally have looked into doing for myself is there's like a software out there and you got to pay money for it, but it's like called Delete Me.
Mhm.
And it'll go, and kind of like remove your personal information from these random places where your data gets sold, and then it's like, wow, it was a little terrifying. Shout out to our board member Lara, who like sat down and basically did sort of like a security check and like Googled my name and was like, here's all of the places where like your family's names are here and your old at home address, and just there's a lot out there, right? And so that's like a small thing that feels pretty good to me to like be able to, save up and then use a tool like that to like make sure my personal address and stuff isn't out there, right? Because I don't want to be found by people who have harm, in their hearts or are wanting to cause harm.
Yeah. And if I could, just like while you're doing that stuff, and in whatever the world looks like right now, I just really encourage folks not to wait to be joyful. Right? Like don't don't lose that play and that joy and that excitement during this time. Like it's honestly, this has been um, one of the it's been like such a tough time, but also like there's been so many wonderful things that have happened. And like, I've heard so many people say, like, oh gosh, I feel silly for being excited about this thing right now, given what the world looks like. And I'm just like, lean into that excitement. Like, don't, don't tamp down your joy or excitement um, during this time. Like, experience it fully, and we need it. Like we need to see you joyful. And so I hope that that doesn't just sort of get dismissed during difficult times.
Yes, I love that so much. We need to see you joyful. Oh my gosh. And as someone who I spent a lot of the year, working on Trans Joy Fest in particular, um, kind of love the idea of maybe wrapping up these conversations with some trans joys because, as you said, as has come to light, and not that it was a secret, but things are very dark and scary, and future is unknown in a lot of ways, and it's easy, speaking from personal experience. In the last couple of days, I've felt very overwhelmed and discouraged myself. And yet, like, I have to remember to be intentional, like to create that joy and to bring it in, whether it's getting to play with my two baby kittens, which I just got a couple weeks ago.
What are
I've
their names?
literally been doing that every night for like, I don't know, 30 minutes. Maybe I'll just get up and I've got a little one of those Swisher toys and they're leaping around and I'm literally laughing out loud, and I'm not thinking about what Fox News is saying about our community, and I'm not thinking about the fearful, stressful things, so those moments. So I'd love to hear, what are you doing? What do you do for joy,
Well, first,
Nomi?
I'm
Where's your
assuming
joy?
you named your kitties.
What was that?
What did you name your kittens?
Oh my goodness. So Leo came very quickly to me because this little boy kitten would grab the toy and like pull it and like growl at me the first couple of days. And I was like, you're like a little lion, Leo the
Uh,
lion.
I love it.
Uh, and then they're from the same litter. And so I'm a dork and I like alliteration. So I was like, Leo, I need an L name, Lucy.
Okay.
Leo and Lucy.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
totally, right? Like, I think pets are such a great joy piece. I've got three rats, bacon, lettuce, and tomato, and they are just a hoot and a half. And I love that it's uh, time for pumpkins, and um, and uh, it is always just a joy. I so I like carving a small pumpkin, and then letting the rats make it a spooky pumpkin because they will love to eat all the seeds and stuff. And you'll probably see those of you I'm friends with on social media will probably see some spooky pumpkins coming soon. That's sort of like co-carved by me and the rats. So that's always such a good time. You know, like I obviously love being out in nature. Like that's part of the reason that I moved to Duluth. It's just so beautiful and time by the lake. Music, I played in a lot of bands, and sort of continuing to make music feels great. And again, just being with people, like even um, Friday night, this last Friday night, I did not want to. I was exhausted. It was a tough week. I was absolutely exhausted. But there was a constitutional bystander training that I felt like I needed to go to. And I got there, and it was so great to see so many friends there who are like-minded and just be amongst people who are like-minded. And then, of course, partway through, I looked down and I realized that I had two different shoes on. And I was just like, I mean, this is the moment, but it was just wonderful to be amongst friends and just sort of be in community. And, it was very passive event, as somebody who was in the audience watching the presentation. But again, it was just so nice to get hugs and to get smiles from friends and community members.
Love that. That's a lot of joy, and I cannot wait to see these co-created pumpkins.
Yes. Yes.
Ah, oh, I love that so much. I was just telling my child that we're gonna have to get some pumpkins, and would she like to carve them or paint them? And of course, she said both.
Sure.
So I am excited to see all of the pumpkin carving talent out there in our Northland community.
Oh yeah.
That'd be fun to do like a little carving contest or
Mhm.
something sometime.
Totally.
Which actually reminds me, and I know we're coming up on time here, but if you haven't already heard, we are hosting our first ever Halloween party on Halloween night, Friday the 31st at the Depot. So if you want to come and hang out with cool queer folks and trans folks, we're gonna have DJ Octavia Forte spinning tunes all night. There's gonna be a costume contest, so feel like it's like the queers holiday. So start your night off with Trans Northland and connect with community. And if you'd like to help with that, I'm not a big Halloween guy myself, just because of how I was raised. And we need folks like you to come and help us decorate and set it all up. So if you're interested, reach out to me, get in touch with us. We always appreciate our volunteers who are really the folks who make things happen. So thanks to all of y'all who are amazing. We love you. And yeah, I was just trying to think, what should I mention as we wrap this up? Well, I first off want to just say thank you again
Yeah.
to you.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you
me.
for being here. Oh my gosh, so much love for you and just deep appreciation for who you are and all of
Likewise.
the amazing work that you do. Well, I'll just throw out another mention. If you're looking for things, ways to connect, check out our events calendar on our website. And yeah, thanks to you, the folks who have tuned in, whether you've been watching us live today, or if you are watching us on YouTube after the fact. We love it. We love connecting with you. So reach out to us anytime. Thanks again, Nomi. And I don't have a good signing off line yet, but just take good care, friends. Like find joy, find your people, and do your best to take good care. And we're always here. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. Stay tuned for an announcement about our upcoming guest star. And I guess that's it. We're not going to be live anymore
Bye,
now.
everyone.
Bye bye.